The following program has been pre-recorded, so please don't call in at this time. If you wish to participate in the program, tune in at 5 p.m. every Wednesday for A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio. Good evening, fellow humans. This is Wayne Parker with A Pause for Thought here on Baton Rouge Community Radio, coming to you from the palatial studios of Baton Rouge Community Radio. And for tonight, we're going to have a topic for discussion here. Wait a minute, just hang on a second. Okay, they're gone. That was some inconsiderate jerk driving by with a boombox car, I guess. Lang, you and I should do a show about that sometime.
Yeah, how
hey,
about you now?
As a matter of fact, yeah, let's do one tonight. Anyhow, just to remind everybody, this is a live call-in show. You can call in 343-9927, 343-9927 to offer your thoughts, opinions, challenges, or whatever on the topic of the evening, which, of course, is... Are people increasingly behaving like inconsiderate jerks in America, or am I just old, Lang? I wonder sometimes if I'm just a grumpy old man, but...
Maybe it's a little of both.
Well, it could be, you never know. I know that it does annoy me, and I've actually found that I'm not alone anyway, but I thought I'd start off with just exactly what nuisance noise is, and of course now I don't have my notes in front of me, but can you believe this? I can't even find my notes now for noise ordinances. Oh, right there. Okay. Anyway, looking at my Wikipedia information, nuisance as applies to noise as far as I'm concerned here, but nuisance is from the archaic nuisance from French, the nuisance, I guess, or nuisance, the Latin nocere, to hurt. And it says here that nuisance is one of the oldest causes of action known to the common law, with cases framed in nuisance going back almost to the beginning of recorded case law. Nuisance signifies that the, quote, right of quiet enjoyment, close quote, is being disrupted to such a degree that a tort is being committed. And I had to look up what tort means. I know it's some kind of reform, right? Tort is a wrongful act, not including a breach of contract or trust, that results in injury to another person's property, reputation, or the like, and for which the injured party is entitled to compensation. So, I don't know, that could mean anything as far as compensation, I guess. But, Lang, I was not too surprised to see that there have been many instances in the Western world anyway of people getting angry and committing violent acts over loud noise. I found an article, now granted this is from back in the 90s, but everything I've read elsewhere on noise, intentional noise, like such as boombox cars, indicates that the problems are increasing. But this is an article from the Independent of the United Kingdom from 1994, and it talks about how 17 people in the previous year had died as the result of noise disputes, noise, confrontations. One of them here is Harry Stevenson, was stabbed 22 times by Colin Shankland, who had a habit of revving his car early in the morning, playing his radio loudly, shouting in the street, and allowing his dog to run wild. And apparently the neighborhood united against him, and he got angry and went on a rampage with a knife and stabbed several people and killed Mr. Stevenson, stabbing him 22 times. Another one here is a John Pubrick was murdered by his neighbor Michael Gilfillan after he complained about Gilfillan's music. One here, here's one. There's where a guy was battered to death in his apartment after his neighbors became sick of his loud classical music. Now there's one, it's not rap,
So-
it's not an obnoxious music, or
So you've got two cases where the person making the loud noise was the one who killed the others, and one case where the classical music guy who was making loud noise was killed by the people suffering from the loud noise.
Right. Well, there's actually a few more. There's one here where the people suffering from the loud noise set a family's home on fire and killed their 3-year-old kid.
My goodness.
Yeah, I mean, this, people get angry with this. They get mad. And, I mean, I get mad, but I'm not going to kill anybody over. I'm more likely to be one of those people getting killed for complaining about it, because I'll say something to people with, or indicate my pleasure through sign language if I'm in my car and they're booming next to me or whatever, drowning my stereo out, because I play my stereo at sensible levels, but anyhow, as you can tell, and from our earlier conversation, I am a bit insecure about whether or not I am just old and grumpy, or if there is some reason, or if maybe I'm not all that unusual in getting angry over people who play loud music or otherwise make a lot of noise unnecessarily. And I was wondering if you were able to find anything on the effects of noise like that.
Well, there is a recent report just this past February on the BBC in their health news about a condition that's been identified and given the name of misophonia, which is not necessarily response to loud noises, but some people have a sensitivity to certain triggering noises that what they did was they performed some MRI studies on individuals with misophonia and those without, and discovered differences in their brain structure in those that have a strong or excessive emotional response of anger to certain noises. And to get a little technical with it, it's the anterior insular cortex is overly active in people with misophonia. And it was wired to connect to the emotional centers in a way that isn't present in other people.
You're not comforting me.
Well, you could go in for an MRI and check it out.
Actually, I'm pretty sure I do suffer from misophonia in some respects. The way I've encountered it, and I never understood why this was. Well, of course I did. I blamed it on other people, and it was their fault. But I found out relatively recently that it is an actual psychological or brain phenomenon. And what angers me, and has since I was a little child, is people eating loudly, smacking their fingers when they eat something with that's messy with their hands, or popping their gum, or just chewing like a mule. That just drives me up the wall. And I could be sitting in a crowded, noisy restaurant and hear somebody smacking his fingers across the room, and I'll hear it, and I'll turn and glare at him. But to me, that's different. Okay, that's a psychological thing that I tell people is clearly my problem, because it's way out of proportion to what is acceptable or what can be considered really offensive behavior. But I think that the thing with boombox cars or loud cars, mufflers or whatever, is a different phenomenon, though.
Well, that may be. I mean, there's other studies. A fellow who did some soundscape studies reached the conclusion that some people try to dominate their environment by making loud noises. So there may be a psychological dimension to the sound producer as well as to the person who gets angry when they hear it.
I haven't wondered that, but that makes sense with kind of what I was thinking. But you often see young people booming their cars with these new boombox. I say new; they're probably about 20 years. Been around 20 years or so since then. Now, but it's usually younger people, and they tend to have the insecurity problems, of youth and all that stuff. And so, projecting power in that regard, that could be what that is too. I, for one, having a different manifestation of insecurities when I was a young man, I wondered if these kids booming these stereos were doing it to keep people at arm's length because they were insecure. They wanted to avoid too close of a contact with people. I don't know. But that reminds me of something. I saw this on CNN back in the early 80s. Back when they had journalists and they actually went around getting real stories, than instead of what they do now, the 24-hour loop they have now. But there was a journalist that came out to California to interview a young guy, of course, who had a boombox pickup truck. Now, this is back in the 80s. This is before all the technology that enabled these big subwoofers and all that we hear today from half a mile away. But he had filled his truck bed with the big box-type stereo speakers. And he had the bed tilted up at a slight angle toward the back, obviously, so that he could fit the amplifiers and everything on the frame of his truck beneath it. And he would drive around the city with this truck booming out the back of it. You know what I mean? So he wasn't listening to it for his own enjoyment. And the reporter drove around with him, you know. And, of course, I'm already screaming at my television because I hated that stuff even back then, you know. But then the reporter asked him, he says, don't you feel, and I'm waiting for him to say, you know, like a jerk, you know. And he says, don't you feel embarrassed? And the guy's like, oh, no, I think it's cool. You know, and I couldn't believe this. It's like you had a perfect opportunity here to tell this kid and maybe strangle this whole phenomenon in his crib, you know. But now, you know, he just had to ask him if he was embarrassed and let it drop right there. But anyway, as you can tell, I'm annoyed with that sort of thing. Anyway, you seem to be enjoying having... Well, go ahead, please.
I would
Interrupt
just
me.
say there's also possible cultural factor to this. The same guy who did the soundscape studies I mentioned a minute ago, he also came up with conclusion that different urban and suburban areas have different soundscapes because of the different cultures they represent. And the kind of sounds you'll hear in one cultural area will be different than in another. And it's, you know, I'm not that familiar with the boombox experience. I don't hear it around town as often as you apparently do. I've rarely encountered that here. But, you know, with our mobile society, cultures cross what would be cultural boundaries in the horse and buggy days, and so you encounter a lot of stuff that's perfectly within the norm in one culture, and just as in other modes of expression, whether it's, you know, art or styles of dress or styles of cars, soundscapes present a different cultural identity.
Yeah, okay. But some of those things don't impose themselves on you, I guess, is the way I look at it. And nuisances also, nuisance noise in particular, is also defined in that way, too. For instance, they say here that a nuisance, if someone paints their house purple, that may offend you, but it's not a legitimate nuisance that you can complain about. A person's crying baby is not something that you can complain about. Basically, it's anything that interrupts a person's peaceful use of his own property. And noise, such as, you know, loud music or whatever, is an intrusion on, you know, your person. And I was glad to see this in the definition, because that's how I feel about it. It's an assault on me. I should not have to hear somebody else's music when I'm sitting in my living room. You know, I shouldn't have to put up with somebody else's noise like that. It's just that's one of the things that makes me mad.
Right. Well, and that's why we have nuisance ordinances, which go beyond what the common law was. But I was just speaking to whether the person's a jerk or not.
Right,
and cultural norms, it's not.
And I have seen plenty of people sitting around me at a traffic light when someone would pull up and booming his stereo so loudly you can't even talk to the person next to you. And from looking around at the people near me, I'm thinking I'm the only one that's even hearing this guy or even noticing him, you know. And I thought, man, is there something wrong with me, you know? Anyway, is there something wrong with me? Give us a call and let us know what you think. 343-9927, 343-9927. We're talking about whether or not people are inconsiderate jerks with their boombox cars, or if Wayne is just a grumpy old man here. But yeah, you were saying something earlier about, well, sound is a special sense, right? It's kind of special among all of ours.
You'd mentioned some research you came across about how it feeds more directly into the brain, and it's always on alert. Even when you're asleep, your brain's aware of what's coming in through your sound inputs. And some studies or some speculation of experts is that this dates back to the early days in the evolution of man, when they were more vulnerable. Humans were more vulnerable during the nighttime hours, and so their brains stayed on alert even when they were sleeping. And so there have been recent studies on health impacts showing. You've got a call there?
Yep, just a second here. Good evening, you're on the air with a pause for thought. Let me know who's calling, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Wade.
Hey, Wade.
Hey, I'm just wondering how, I didn't hear the beginning of your program, so I'm wondering how you got started on this subject. I think that the whole booming car thing is not nearly as prevalent as it was, but yeah, of course, if you're encroaching on someone else's peace of mind as far as, you know, loud music or smoke from a trash fire, whatever it might be, then yeah, that's an encroachment. But I'm wondering, how did you get on this subject?
It's just been something that's bothered me forever, and ever since I've been doing this show, I wanted to do that topic and talk about it. But I think you're right. I'm glad to hear you say that it seems like the boombox cars are not as prevalent as they had been, and maybe it's because people are starting to learn that they're pestering people. But,
right. Well, and yeah, and maybe people are recognizing that it's not good for their hearing. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, chances are they won't know about that until too late. Until later on in life. I mean, of course, I'm still waiting for my hearing to start fading from all the loud music I played in headphones and all that stuff. But I would never annoy people with it, overtly.
I wonder if this is a subject that might apply to something else. In my neighborhood, across the street and a few houses over, someone has installed a swimming pool heater, and it kicks on all through the night various times, and it sounds as if a diesel truck is coming through the neighborhood. And I haven't spoken with the neighbor about it because I'm not certain if anything can be done about it, but it does seem it's similar to this radio issue in that it's a loud noise that's making noise in the neighborhood every night, and it's simply for the purpose of having their pool heated overnight, which is kind of weird too.
Yeah.
Are there ordinances? Are there laws
yes,
that we can?
There are. In fact, I made copies of the Baton Rouge ordinances, and they mention stuff like that. So a little later on, I'll go through those and talk about it. I think you're probably covered, actually. But I'm baffled as to what kind of a heater would sound like a diesel engine. I mean, have you?
Yeah, it sounds like maybe it's fueled by natural gas or something, but it makes an extreme roar when it takes off, and then it keeps rumbling after that. So.
Yeah, well, that might be a way for you to start a conversation with your neighbor. It's like, hey, man, I've been hearing this obnoxious noise coming from your house. What kind of a pool heater do you have? But not like that. Don't ask it like that, of course. You know better than that. But, but you could just go over and express curiosity as to what kind of a heater would make such noise, and then just mention later on in the conversation, by the way, it really ticks me off.
Yeah, that's a good plan. Well, I will be listening. I will probably be in traffic for a while, so I will be listening to hear about what ordinances might apply. So
okay, thanks a lot, Wade. All right, so I have a little bit of confirmation there. Plus, he confirmed my apparent observation that boombox cars are diminishing, but not in my mind, though. It still angers me just as much as it did when I was, like 40 years ago or whatever. But anyway. Oh, let's see. We were talking about the effects of noise. I guess now might not be a bad time to talk about the ordinances.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Well, let's see. I found two sets. There is Chapter 11, I think it is, or Title 11, which covers motor vehicles. And it states here that it shall be unlawful for the driver of any vehicle to make an unnecessary noise by means of the horn or other device on his said vehicle. He being required, this is what I thought was very interesting, he being required to drive his vehicle as quietly as possible at all times, and especially during the hours between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. So, and the provisions of this section shall be in addition to the provisions of the anti-noise ordinance in Title 12, which of course I have copied also. But so that right there, I wanted to mention too that they say especially during the hours of 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. that people need to be quiet. But there, many people seem to believe that it's okay to be a loud, obnoxious person to your neighbors up to 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, and then you have to be quiet. And that's not true. There is no time when you're allowed to be that way, according to these ordinances. But Section 12, or of 12, whatever, noises interfering with the enjoyment of property or public peace and comfort, no person shall make or cause to be made any loud and raucous noise in the parish which is offensive to persons of ordinary sensibilities and which renders the enjoyment of life or property uncomfortable or interferes with the public peace and comfort. This sounds to me like the diesel
Swimming
pool warmer, yeah. Or maybe the guy's got a natural gas furnace or something. And I know big furnaces. I just can't. I would love to hear about that, or just know what kind of heater it is. Anyway, the following acts, among others, are declared to create loud and raucous noises and shall be deemed a violation of this chapter. The use of any abusive, indecent, profane, or vulgar language in a public place. And language that they state here is by its very utterance tends to incite an immediate breach of the peace. So that would hit certain kinds of music nowadays for several things: the vulgarity of the language, the profanity, and as well as the volume. By the way, were you going to jump in with something on the?
Go ahead.
Okay.
The ordinance.
The playing of any radio, phonograph, tape, compact disc, musical instrument, or any other machine or device capable of producing or reproducing sound from a stationary location, or with such volume as to disturb the peace, quiet, comfort, blah, blah, blah. And the same thing with motor vehicles. The use of any automobile, motorcycle, bus, streetcar, vehicles, or vehicles so out of repair or so loaded which emits or creates loud grating, grinding, or rattling noise. The blowing of any steam whistle attached to any stationary boiler. The discharge into the open air of the exhaust of any stationary engine. And let's see, the discharge into the open air of the exhaust from any motor vehicle except through a muffler. So I'm not sure, they don't specifically mention swimming pool heaters here, but I'd be willing to bet that it's worth pursuing and checking on that, because if it's loud enough to invade your home, then it's creating a problem. So anyway, that's what I got on the ordinances anyhow, but the nowhere in here does it say that you are allowed to be an obnoxious jerk to your neighbors at any time. So I wanted to put that to rest.
That's not one of the rights protected under the Bill of Rights.
No, not yet. Although I'm sure somebody will make
jerk.
An argument about it being your free speech to make whatever noise you want to. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody made that argument. Anyway, this is Wayne Parker with Lang Baker on A Pause for Thought, Baton Rouge Community Radio. Feel free to call in 343-9927 and share your thoughts and opinions. I'm still waiting to find out if I've been judged as a grumpy old man or if I'm just legitimately annoyed by obnoxious jerks. Anyway.
Yeah, well, there was an article in the Atlantic magazine a little over a year ago. It was April of 2016. The title of the article was "The Future Will Be Quiet." And they run through some of the technological advances that will reduce noise. Well, one thing that isn't really reducing noise, but is reducing the impact of noise, is the advance in technology for devices that block sound. Noise canceling devices, which currently they've got the technology where it can, wipe out a continuous noise, but they're working on it to where it can also handle abrupt noises. Just, like an explosion or something comes on suddenly and ends suddenly. In another advance they talked about, when you mentioned earlier, I think it was before we went on the air, about difficulty of tracking down boombox violators.
Yeah.
That they're working on technology similar to red light cameras that can catch a passing vehicle emitting a noise louder than the legal limit and take a picture and send a ticket to the driver.
That's encouraging. In fact, I've often fantasized about developing something that would fire their booming back at them
There you go.
only directionally, only a quarter beat behind theirs.
Uh-huh.
Because that would have to be maddening to have it coming back at you just a quarter beat late, But that was one of the things I thought of. But, I did call Baton Rouge Police Department to find out how they go about enforcing these things. And the officer I spoke to, I told him I didn't think they had time to really, pursue these types of complaints all the time, or that often, because there are more serious things going on. And see, I admit that about myself. My problems aren't, the most important thing most of the time. But the officer told me that if it's tough to catch boombox cars because they're moving. And if somebody goes past your house and rattles your window and you call the cops, well, they're gone by the time they get there, if they even do show up. But he said if he gets a call or gets several calls from people in an area about a boombox car, he would drive out that way, and if he happened to encounter them, he'd pull them over. And he said his criteria is that if he can hear it in his car, it's too loud. And frankly, I thought that was more extreme than I am, but I'll go with it, But I know over in Gulfport, when I lived in Gulfport, Mississippi years ago, or near Gulfport, they had an ordinance there where they would provide stiff fines if you had a boombox car. And I think that was finally pushed out because they were charging people huge fines, and it was such a subjective standard. But now I see an article here from their local news affiliate, WLOX, that Harrison County, where Gulfport is located, is looking at buying portable decibel meters to enable them to actually measure the noise level of a boombox car or anything else, like a pool heater, and determine if it's excessive and, issue a citation.
One factor there is at what distance are you making the measurement? Because, of course, the further away you get, the lower the decibel is going to register. So.
Yeah, and I think I might, by my standard, be lenient in that regard. If it's reaching that decibel on somebody's property, that would be it. I mean, if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're booming your stereo, so what? No one's hearing it. At least, if the animals are, they're not going to complain, right? But
they may be suffering, though.
Well, good point. But look, I'm not that bad, all right? Don't give me ideas. But if it's loud enough to impose on somebody else's home, I mean, if somebody drives by a block away, which happens near me, frequently, and rattles your windows with their stereo, well, then, that's too loud. But you've got to be able to measure that. And you're right. Then it would. I'm sure that the people in power would work out something and make it all.
Yeah, you expect that Gulfport, Mississippi ordinance is going to address so many decibels at so many feet.
Yeah, I'm sure they would have to put a distance on it. Yeah. But noisy neighbors is an issue that apparently has plagued humanity for a long time.
As long as there have been neighbors, I expect.
Yep, I suppose. And as the article from the Independent UK talked about, people have been killing each other or burning their houses down as a result of loud noises and whatnot. And there's actually a little thing here, help for obnoxious, inconsiderate neighbors, or help against. And actually, I just added that. It's just this here, types of loud neighbors. Thinking of striking back at your loud neighbors? Not all noisy neighbors are alike. Identify the type of neighbor you're dealing with first, and then come up with a strategy. And they define 7 different types of noisy neighbors.
Okay.
And the ones that I thought were, the ones that are really annoying to me, the entitled. These are folks who firmly believe that they are entitled to make as much noise as they please, and they are not going to let other people's complaints get in the way of their right to have a good time on their own property, even if it's booming their sound into my property, okay? Then there are the bullies. Bullies actively relish the thought of annoying you. And then there are the psychotics, who are just nutso. And they caution against giving them a taste of their own medicine, so to speak. It's something that I've considered several times, because, like they say here, if it turns out you're dealing with a bully, if you're dealing with somebody who has no scruples, you're going to lose. And my thought when I saw that was, hey, when I'm that angry, I have no scruples. I'm going to win. Because I've thought about buying a train locomotive horn before and aiming it at a car or whatever. But anyhow,
what do they suggest you do if it's a psycho?
call the police.
Uh-huh.
And of course, you want to talk to your neighbors first, of course, and approach them nicely and let them know first. But yeah, if they're really continuing to be a problem, rather than risk fisticuffs or having somebody burn your house down while you're in bed sleeping, or kill you, or hire a gang to bludgeon you to death, as one instance I had here, you probably ought to call the cops. And don't try to escalate it or take matters into your own hand. But boy, I sure have said an awful lot about myself tonight and my phobias and everything else, huh, Lang? But I told you, I get worked up over boombox cars in particular and obnoxious, inconsiderate neighbors in general.
May you encounter no more boomboxes.
Well, that would be nice, but I don't think we're going to make that. But we'll see. I was thinking too along this. You remember the cassette players, the portable cassette players, the boomboxes, the original boomboxes. I mean, that's what they were.
Yeah.
Kids would carry these things on buses and blast them. I think that's where I first got the idea that they were doing it just to, create a wall around themselves. But I remember one of the first Star Trek movies with William Shatner and the like and all that, where they got on a bus. They came back to Earth and were on a bus, and some kid got on with that booming stereo. And I don't know if it was Shatner or Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, got up and just kicked the speakers out of it, and then the whole audience, at the movie just laughed and applauded. But anyway, this is Wayne Parker with Lang Baker on A Pause for Thought here on Baton Rouge Community Radio. We've been discussing boombox cars and the like. We got to go now, so we thank you for listening, and you have a good night.